Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this one we're going to be going over the top 10 overpowered smithing weapon builds in Elden Ring. We're going to be going over different Ashes of War and the best weapons to use with them. And we're also going to be talking about alternative options in this one too. We're even going to go over facts, different facts about the weapons, Ashes of War, everything you need to know really to make these into powerful builds, and we're going to go over the locations of the Ashes of War and weapons themselves too. It's probably one of the most in-depth videos I've ever done. Instead of doing a top 20, I decided to do a top 10 with a lot more information involved in this one. This is going to be a great video. All the best ashes in detail. Of course, Seppuku is going to be covered in many others. There's really a lot here to go through. There's a lot of stuff I think you're going to enjoy that's going to be helpful with this video too, especially ahead of DLC. We're going to cover the best starting class for each one also, so that's going to be even more informative. In this video, you're going to master the smithing weapons, learn about the Ashes of War. This is top 10 smithing builds in Elden Ring. And at number 10, we have the Grave Scythe with the Ash of War Black Flame Tornado. Now, this Ash of War will give you a ton of fire and percentage damage. It does massive damage, doesn't have a lot of hyper armor, but overall, it's a very good Ash of War. This Ash is going to scale primarily with your Faith stat, by the way, but the Grave Scythe we're going to talk about in a little bit too, because it gives you near colossal AR for the weight, especially in Flame Art and Sacred Affinity. Yeah, this is really one of those ones that's incredible when you pull it off. A little bit difficult to pull off at times, but when you do, the damage ceiling is insanely high on this one. In a second here, we're going to jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know, then we're going to go over best starting class and some info. Really cool to look at too. We have the Flame Art Grave Scythe. Of course, we have Black Flame Tornado on it. We are using any seal. I had the Giant Seal for this. We did hit 51 poise. We have the Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman, Shard of Alexander. We have the Flame tier and the Faith tier. Let's talk about stats. And for the stats, we have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 26 Endurance. We have 80 Faith using the Faith tier. And for buffs, we are using Golden Vow and Hellish Fury to increase our damage. Now, where to find this weapon? By the lake-facing cliffs, that's where I like to farm this. There's a couple different places you could farm for this weapon. Overall, I think it's between a 2 and 4% drop rate, and then you could get the Black Flame Tornado Ash of War. I think this is the earliest you can get it at the Windmill Village in Altless Plateau. And the best starting class for this one, in my opinion, is Confessor. You'll get a little bit of dexterity and a little bit of strength, and you'll have Faith too. It's a solid starting class and a really good choice for Black Flame Tornado. And now for the notes. Black Flame Tornado would make it higher if it had better hyper armor. Its damage ceiling is great. It pulls mostly from your Faith stat and ignores the weapon a bit. Awesome for big targets, and this is a reliable setup with the Grave Scythe because with Flame Art you have over 700 AR. And at number 9 we have the Bandit Curved Swords with Flaming Strike in Flame Art Affinity. This is one of my top 3 favorite builds in this video. This is definitely one you're going to want to try out. This works great as a jump attack build because of the fact that you get the successive attacks on top of the fact that fire is relatively easy to boost using the Flame tier and also using the Fire Scorpion Charm. It works well against Godfrey too. I believe notes will come up on here because in first phase he has 20% fire resistance. In phase 2 he has 0, so overall this is actually a solid setup to take on Godfrey, and for a lot of the bosses in the game this build will work quite well. And what makes the build so effective is that the Bandit Curved Swords, unlike a lot of the Curved Swords and Twin Blades which get a C in Flame Art, the Bandit Curved Swords have good base damage to begin with, and they get a B in Flame Art and Sacred Affinity. The Bandit Curved Swords, honestly, I love too because they have a lot of versatility in different affinities. I recently did a high-level build video, if you want to check that out, that's on my channel, one of my recent videos, and the Bandit Curved Swords actually had the highest AR and blood affinity at near max level. One important thing to note, by the way, when activating this is make sure you two-hand the offhand one first, do the follow-up attack, then go back to power stancing and do the follow-up attack again so you get the fire imbued on both swords. Xbox, PlayStation, and PC will all have different controls. For me, it's Y and LB and then Y and RB back. Make sure you do the follow-up attack too, though, because that's what puts fire on your swords ultimately, and that's what will end up giving you around 750 AR. Let's go over stats, equipment, and everything you need to know for this awesome build. And we have 2 Bandit Curved Swords in Flame Art Affinity with Flaming Strike on both. We're using the Giant Seal. We have the Raptor's Black Feathers, hit 51 poise, Fire Scorpion Charm, Claw Talisman, Rotwing Sword Insignia, Shard of Alexander, Flame tier, and the Thorny tier too. And for stats on this build, we have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 26 Endurance. We have 70 Faith, 17 Strength, and 15 Dexterity. We are using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength to buff this build. 17 strength I had, by the way, so you could also do the Grave Scythe build. You could put a couple points back if you don't need it. Now, the Church of Pilgrimage in the Weeping Peninsula is the earliest you could farm the Bandit Curve Swords, at least as far as I know. That's an awesome farming spot. And then you get the Flaming Strike Ash of War at Redmane Castle. And it's actually around the back entrance. There's a Teardrop Scarab you got to hit for the Ash of War. The best starting class here, in my opinion, is going to be the Confessor. Again, you'll get a little bit of strength, a little bit of dexterity that you're going to need anyway, and then you're going to have some faith too. And some quick notes, one of my 3 favorite builds on here. Flaming Strike will give you around 750 AR with the Bandit Curve Sword. Sacred Blade does the same thing. We're going to show that off in a second. Try these out for a really fun time. The Holy option could be really good come DLC because it gives you a lot of damage. We're going to show that one off now. And now for the Holy option. If Holy ends up being good in DLC, this could be really great. What you're going to do here is you're going to use Sacred Blade on both. There's a little bit of a different setup I'm going to show to boost Holy damage, but Sacred Blade is a nice alternative around the same AR, and this is going to be for Holy damage. Let's jump into equipment. And we have 2 Bandit Curve Swords and Sacred Affinity with Sacred Blade. Any seal will do here. We have Raptor's Black Feathers, hit 51 poise. We have the Sacred Scorpion Charm, Claw Talisman, Rotwing Sword Insignia, Shard of Alexander in case you're using the Ash for some ranged, Holy tier, and we have Thorny tier. And number 8, we have another one of my 3 favorites on this list, and one that'll also net you a ton of damage that you could put on a weapon of your choice, and that's the Bloodblade Ash of War. I like, in this case, using it with an Occult Scavenger Curve Sword. A lot of people prefer the Reduvia when it comes to Bloodblade because it doesn't cost HP, you could pretty much spam it, it's relatively easy to use, but the only downside is you're locked behind a dagger. With the Bloodblade Ash of War, you could put it on a lot of different weapons. 2 that I really like are the Scavenger Curve Sword on Occult, and I'll talk about this in the notes too, but another one I like is also an Occult Nagakiba, which gives you some nice range. When you make contact with a weapon, you get additional bleed from both Bloodblade and making contact. I think I actually get a no-hit on the Fire Giant here. Not that it really counts because I'm actually using my own HP when you use Bloodblade, but if you're good enough with it, you have 60 Vigor to kind of make up for that. There's so much damage to be had, and the ranged bleed is an awesome option too. And that's really why this makes the number 8 spot for me, because Bloodblade can be ridiculous. You can get a ton of bleed build up, it could take down bosses really fast, and yeah, it costs HP, but you get to use your own weapon, and a lot of different weapons I like curved swords and even katanas. So try this one out for sure. You could even throw Bloodblade on one of them and then Seppuku on the other and mix a jump attack build with a Bloodblade build. I've done that before too, so you can get in a decent amount of bleed with your jump attacks, and you can turn back to having the ranged option of Bloodblade as another alternative. If you're wondering why I don't have 51 poise, I'm under a weight of 16, meaning that I'm getting 12% additional damage for the Blue Dancer Charm, and since Bloodblade is purely physical damage, it will boost this Ash of War. I also felt like adding in a different talisman that I don't use too often. For equipment, we have the Scavenger Curve Sword on Occult with Bloodblade. Any seal for buffs, we have the White Mask and just pants on. Shard of Alexander, Blue Dancer Charm, Millicent's Prosthesis, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. Then we have the Thorny tier and Faith tier. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance. We have 20 Dexterity, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, and then we have 70 Arcane for good damage, and we are buffing this with Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength too. So I normally run this with the Nagakiba, and it's an early way to do this. You can get that here in the Murkwater Cave area or below at the Dragon Burnt Ruins, and then the Erdtree Gazing Hill you can get Bloodblade. I'll show where the Scavenger Curve Sword is later in the video. And the best starting class, no matter what for this, is going to be the Bandit. The Bandit's great for this. You could also go Samurai too if you're using the Nagakiba. They're kind of equally as good. The Nagakiba has more reach, the Scavenger Curve Sword's lighter weight. Let's go to notes. Bloodblade's really fun to use. If you make contact with a weapon, it can do around 120 to 150 bleed. Nagakiba is a cool alternative option. I use it a lot on Occult. This is one I would try if you want ranged bleed that will keep you focused for your playstyle. And yeah, when we do the Seppuku one, we'll show you where to get the Scavenger Curve Sword. At number 7, we have the Rusted Anchor, which I love for the pierce damage. I love this with Wild Strikes. The combination is nearly perfect. And honestly, the pure physical damage you get from this without having to go into any affinity or whatever and getting around 700 AR or so is excellent. Seriously, this is awesome for the pierce and counter damage. There are so many enemies and bosses in the game, by the way, that take good pierce damage as a whole, that between the pure physical damage, the successive attack damage, and the fact that you're getting counter damage is awesome. For equipment, we have the Rusted Anchor and Heavy Affinity of Wild Strikes. We have the Claw Mark Seal. We hit 51 poise. You can check out the armor set. Shard of Alexander, Ritual Sword Talisman, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Green Turtle Talisman, Thorny tier, and the Faith tier for buffs. And for stats on this one, we are basically a pure strength build here. When we're two-handing it, we're probably having about 99 strength here with 66. I think we get to 99. 60 vigor, 22 mind, 33 endurance, and then we have 25 faith with the faith tier. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength to buff this, and again, this is a really good one. You could also add the Spear Talisman. I believe that could be activated too with this. And for the location on this one, you're going to get it at Morn Tunnel. I believe it's the boss drop for that tunnel. And then the Ash of War Wild Strikes is up past Stormhill Shack. As you make your way to Margit, there's a Teardrop Scarab. Now for all pure strength builds, I go with Wretch because the hero class has unnecessary arcane you're not going to need in this case. So for me, the Wretch class is probably best. If you're ever going to go pure strength, I would just go with Wretch. Now for a good alternative option for this one, if you take out Green Turtle Talisman, add in Lord of Blood's Exaltation, and then throw on the White Mass, you could use the Great Stars in Heavy Affinity with Bloodflame Blade for a lot of bleed build-up with Wild Strikes. Yeah, this is a good way to get bleed build-up fast. Now, I don't think it has the same AR. You're not going to get nearly the AR I think on the Rusted Anchor. It's probably going to have close to 700, and this is going to have around 6, but you are going to get bleed added to your build. You have a little bit of split damage too, but it makes up for it with the bleed procs. An effective way for sure for taking down some big bosses and such using this, getting in some bleed procs there. We got around, I think, 15,000 damage. Keep in mind this dragon, by the way, does take extra fire damage, even though we're doing very minimal fire damage. It takes extra damage to most things and takes good bleed and status effects too. Last thing to mention is we're going to be doing, I believe, strike damage instead of pierce damage, so having that damage type difference, I still like the Rusted Anchor the best, but this is a solid alternative. If you're looking for a bleed option, I would run Great Stars, Wild Strikes, and Bloodflame Blade. Let's go to notes. And for notes, the pierce counter damage on Rusted Anchor makes it perfect for Wild Strikes. Great Stars is a nice Bloodflame Blade bleed option with less physical damage. They are both worth trying, but I prefer going for all physical damage with the Rusted Anchor. A lot of bosses have low pierce resistance. And the next one up here is we have the Nagakiba with Double Slash, one of my favorite combination builds in the game because I love the Nagakiba's reach, and with Bloodflame Blade you get a good amount of bleed build up too. Now, this Draconic Tree Sentinel is fairly slash and bleed resistant, so we're not going to get as many bleed procs as we normally would with most bosses, but overall I like this compared to the Rivers of Blood now. I love the reach, I love the pure physical damage, dexterity scaling, and the bleed build up too. Yeah, Bloodflame Blade on the Nagakiba is great. Now, the starting katana, the Uchi katana, if that's how you say it, that actually will have better scaling, a little bit more damage, but at the cost of a lot less reach. For me, I prefer having the reach because I'm able to make contact with the weapon easier. I personally find that more beneficial. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Some people would rather have the starting katana. A lot of people will correct it and be like, oh, you get more damage out of the starting katana. Well, that's true. You will get more damage out of the starting katana by a little bit, but you'll be at the cost of significantly less reach. The Nagakiba's reach is a huge benefit for the weapon. Being even a little less close to the boss sometimes can be really helpful, and it can allow you to back up or make your next move easier. For me, that benefit is definitely worth it. We have the Nagakiba with Double Slash and Keen Affinity. We're using the Frenzied Seal, but any seal for buffs works here. White Mass, hit 51 poise. We have the Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Rotten-Winged Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have the Thorny tier. We also have the Faith tier. Let's jump into stats. By the way, if you have Millicent's Prosthesis, I recommend using that over Ritual Sword. I'm just trying to have it set up so that if you only have one, you could still run the build. We are using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Bloodflame Blade, and we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 26 Endurance, and 70 Dex. And the perfect alternative, and one that some people prefer over Double Slash, is Sword Dance. Now, the difference here is Sword Dance is a little bit quicker. It's easier to pull off overall, but it does less damage than completing the full animation of Double Slash. I think what makes them so close is the fact that you could start Sword Dance over by the time you're still going through with the animation for Double Slash. So yeah, Double Slash has the whole higher ceiling as a whole in terms of per Ash of War, but Sword Dance, you're already starting the second one before Double Slash is finished. So it's whatever preference you have. Whatever one you like better, go with. Try them both. They're very similar, and they're honestly both really easy to get early game too. We'll talk about that also. I'm going to show where to get both Ashes of War as well. Definitely give both of these a try. And now for a location. The Double Slash location, the Nagakiba is by the Dragon Burnt Ruins. It could also be found earlier in the game in the ravine right there by Murkwater Cave. And then for Double Slash, it's actually in Celia, or Celia, Town of Sorcery, however you say it. It's on the rooftops. There's a Teardrop Scarab there. You almost can't miss him, and once you hit him, you will net yourself Double Slash. And now for Sword Dance. Sword Dance itself, same thing. The Nagakiba is going to be in the same spot, somewhere around the Dragon Burnt Ruins or by Murkwater Cave, up that ravine if you keep going. And there's the Sword Dance Ash of War by Road End's Catacombs and the Teardrop Scarab too. Best starting class for this one is incredibly straightforward and actually starts you with the other katana, and that's the samurai class. If you're going to go with either one of these and build them up from the ground up, the samurai class is absolutely perfect. And notes, I prefer the Nagakiba for the reach. Double slash is longer, has the higher damage ceiling, but sword dance is quicker and easier to pull off. They're both great options to try. You can run with the same stats, easy to get both early, and impaling thrust with the same build is a cool alternative for poise damage. In number 5, we have the Grave Scythe with Spinning Strikes. The Grave Scythe and Heavy Affinity with Bloodflame Blade and Spinning Strikes is absurd. When this gets going, it does a ton of physical damage and bleed buildup. This is becoming, for me, one of the most overpowered builds in the game. It's actually just quite stupid how you could just stand there and get so much damage. If you saw the damage we stacked on Radon, by the way, all footage is New Game Plus 7. We're able to get over 22,000 damage, and he went down almost instantly. It's incredible with the Grave Scythe. By the way, all talisman locations are linked below in the description. It explains everything there. We have the Grave Scythe with Spinning Strikes, and we have it in Heavy Affinity, Bloodflame Blade, Claw Mark Seal, White Mass, Hit 51 Poise, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Sword Talisman, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Thorny Tier, and Fate Tier. And now we're going to jump into stats here. For the stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 33 Endurance, 66 Strength, so we're two-handing it. We have 99, 25 Faith with the Fate Tier. And we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Bloodflame Blade 2 for our buffs. And now we're going to jump into a really great alternative option, and that is Spinning Weapon on the Grave Scythe, which also does a ton of bleed buildup. Yeah, this is another fun choice that I recommend trying out. The advantage here that I like with Spinning Weapon is the fact that it has a shorter animation. You're not really locked into it like you are with Spinning Weapon as much, so it's a great alternative. Really cool to use and really good for bleed buildup too. Has similar bleed buildup. Spinning Strikes is obviously the better of the two because you can continuously keep it going if you're able to keep it going. But this one, again, the placement is so much easier of the Ash of War too. And where do you get the Grave Scythe? That's where I usually farm it, by lake-facing cliffs. And then Spinning Strikes is kind of interesting to get. You have to get it in the Weeping Peninsula. You could take out the guy there. There's a guy there at NPC and grab it early, or you could do his quest line. There's 2 different ways to get it. Now location 2. Same place for farming the Grave Scythe. By the way, I have an early game build on my channel. If you want to check that out, it's all organized now for that build, for a Spinning Weapon Grave Scythe build. And then you can get Spinning Weapon from Rozier by the Rampart Tower site of Grace and Stormville. Best starting class for this one for me is a hero. You're probably going to need 10 arcane anyway because you're going to use Bloodflame Blade. So it's really only 1 extra point of arcane. Solid starting class. Notes. The more I use Spinning Strikes with the Grave Scythe, the more I realize how good it is. It's actually awesome. This weapon gives Spinning Strikes decent range too. The weapon's AR is huge for the weight. With Bloodflame Blade, you'll get around 95 bleed, and I would absolutely try this build if you like Bloodflame Blade builds. At number 4, we have the Giant Crusher in combination with Royal Knight's Resolve. This has been one of the best combinations since the game released, and it is still incredibly good. So with the Giant Crusher and Royal Knight's Resolve, the huge benefit is this. The Giant Crusher has absurd AR coming close between 950 and 1000. On Occult Affinity, it actually goes over 1000. Flame Martin Sacred 2, you get boosted by 80% with Royal Knight's Resolve. So really it's just taking advantage of the absurdly high AR to begin with and then stacking that with the 80% damage boost with Royal Knight's Resolve. I like to use either Flame Grant Me Strength or Howl and then Golden Vow 2 and then the Charged Tier and of course the Axe Talisman for charged hits. And now we're going to show this off one more time on the dog here because this fight ends up being quick. And then we're going to go over build stats, everything you need to know. If you're looking for a pure physical damage option, this is a great one. I do have one better on this list, but overall Giant Crusher and Royal Knight's Resolve is fantastic. It's also fun to just literally bonk hit stuff with an absurdly big weapon in the Giant Crusher. We have the Giant Crusher in Heavy Affinity with Royal Knight's Resolve. We're using the Claw Mark Seal. We hit 51 poise. And we have the Axe Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Green Turtle Talisman, Arsenal Charm +1, Spike Crack Tier, Fate Tier. Let's jump into stats for this build. And for the stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 33 Endurance, 66 Strength. When we're two-handing it, we get to 99. We have 25 Faith with the Fate Tier. And to buff this, I'm using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. And where do you get the Giant Crusher? Well, it's near this side of Grace here, the Phantom Tree side of Grace, I believe that is. And then if you're looking to get Royal Knight's Resolve, it's at Volcano Manor. You have to actually loop around to unlock one of the doors. There's a whole bunch of doors you can unlock there, and you can grab Royal Knight's Resolve. A must-have Ash for strength builds, by the way. The best starting class here is the Wretch. I say this for most strength builds because of the fact that you don't need the extra arcane that the hero class has, so the Wretch would be perfect here. And for notes on this one, completely bonk way to play, has massive damage from physical damage, which is great, makes it reliable. This weapon is very heavy though, stamina needs to be 30 to 35 to hit 51 poise with an add weight talisman. This weapon can be buffed up to 1 hit, low levels heavy is best, and at high levels occult, flame art, and sacred. Now, not a direct alternative option. If you're looking for a better strength build or more reliable one, I have one better on this list, but one that's a bonk way to do things with intelligence is definitely Carian Grandeur, which in my opinion is pretty comparable. And that's because it could be buffed up to 1 hit. I like Royal Knight's Resolve better because it's more reliable all around, but if you're going to buff things, they're both quite good. We have Carian Grandeur on the Misericordia Day and Magic Affinity. Any seal, any staff. The Spellblade set will boost this. We have the Magic Scorpion Charm, Godfrey icon because it's chargeable, Ritual Sword Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Magic Tier, and the Faith Tier. Let's talk about stats. By the way, I didn't do the 1-hit buffing, I just used Golden Vow, Hal Shibiri, and Terra Magica, but if you low health proc, poison proc, you can buff this one up a lot. 50 Vigor, 70 Intelligence. And at number 3, we have one of my 3 top favorite builds on this list, and that is the Guardian Swordspear with Ice Spear. Now, Ice Spear will scale with Dexterity on the weapon, and it also scales with Intelligence too, but I love it on Dexterity to give me a magic option when I'm running a Dex build. And yes, I was able to compare it. I think there's a video on my channel that compares the two between Keen Affinity and Magic Affinity, and on the Swordspear they actually have comparable damage, which goes to show, by the way, that it does scale with Dexterity, does well in Keen, and scales with Intelligence, and does well in Magic Affinity too. Ice Spear also does 20 poise damage per hit too, so you get stance breaks with Ice Spear. The Frost build up is quite good on it, so you can get some Frost procs as well, and then of course you have a weapon with the mid-range also. So why do I like it with the Guardian Swordspear best? Because AR is a factor as well as the dex scaling on a weapon. So the Guardian Swordspear, because it has such absurd base damage and then good dex scaling, reasonable magic scaling and magic affinity as well, makes it perfect for Ice Spear. I've compared it directly with the Clayman's Harpoon with the same stats, by the way, and it does do more damage. It does do more damage on the Swordspear. The Swordspear is excellent for Ice Spear because of the absurd base damage and great scaling. It works perfect for this build. By the way, I wanted to mention real quick, if you're not subbed, now's the time to sub to my channel. I cover a ton of Elden Ring content, and honestly, I can't wait to cover DLC. I'm going to be covering that like crazy too, so definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, the other thing is, I didn't get hit that much throughout like this entire video, throughout almost all the footage through this video, and it goes to show how powerful smithing weapon combinations are, because I actually had more of a harder time with a lot of the somber weapons than these. Yeah, I was a bit surprised. Now, we have the Guardian Swordspear and Keen Affinity with Ice Spear. We have any seal for buffs. With Spellblade set will boost this. Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Sword Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Magic Tier, Faith Tier. I usually say it in one word. Let's jump into stats. 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance. We have 65 Dexterity. We have 23 Faith, but that gives us 33 with the Faith Tier. Then we're using Golden Vow and Hellish Fury to buff this. Now, if you're doing it in Magic Affinity, the advantage is you can use Terra Magica, but you have to stay in the same spot with that. I prefer a little bit of mobility. Now, where do you get the Guardian Swordspear? Early, you can get the Guardian Swordspear at a lot of the Erdtrees. I think it's most of them are going to have those enemies that drop the Swordspear. That's where you can grab it early. Those aren't too bad to fight there. And then Ice Spear itself is dropped by Knights Cavalry, the first one in Liurnia of the Lakes. Best starting classes are the Samurai if you're going to run it as a Dexterity build, but if you're going to run it as an Intelligence build, I definitely recommend the Prisoner class. They're both good options. So Prisoner if you're going to run it Magic, and then of course Dexterity you're going to run it Samurai. Now for the notes, Ice Spear scales with both Dex and INT on the weapon. Magic and Keen will give you similar damage. Keen is amazing on the Swordspear with over 700 AR. Clayman's Harpoon is a good lighter alternative. Ice Spear does 20 poise damage too. This Ash is amazing and one of my favorites. And at number 2, the combination that I like best for pure physical damage is Guts Greatsword in combination with Lion's Call. The extra reach, the high physical damage on the weapon, and the crazy amount of poise damage you get to, around 40 poise damage, makes this a fantastic build. Yeah, this is absolutely a great one. Lion's Claw is one of the most reliable builds in the game. It made it onto my DLC build, or at least part of it. If you want to check out my DLC build, by the way, again, everything's organized on the channel. That one's there too. That's going to be the exact stats and setup I'm going to be taking into DLC. And that would be the Hallowed Inferno build. This is a pure physical damage version of that. That one is Faith and Strength, so you have a couple different options. Faith and Strength is really varied, but if you're going for pure physical damage, Lion's Claw won't let you down either. It's great. And why do I think Guts Greatsword is best? It's best because it has an absurd amount of range, and the physical damage on it is one of the highest in the game. It makes it a perfect combination with Lion's Claw, and our alternative option, which we're going to show off too, will be great also with this weapon. Yeah, this is a combination that honestly, it cannot let you down. You run through the entire game with this and you'll be able to take down bosses without much of an issue at all. This is nearly a perfect build. Let's jump into stats and equipment. And we have Guts Greatsword and Heavy Affinity, the big Greatsword with Lion's Claw. We're using the Claw Mark Seal. We hit 51 poise. Shard of Alexander, Ritual Sword Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman, Erdtree's Favorite +2, which is an awesome talisman, by the way, Greenburst Crystal Tier, and Faith Tier. For stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 33 Endurance, 66 Strength, 99 Strength when we're two-handing this. We have 15 Dexterity, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, and then for our buffs, we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grip Me Strength too. And now for the alternative option, this is also great, and that is the Giant Hunt option. Now, Giant Hunt does relatively around the same poise. It doesn't have nearly the hyper armor that you get with Lion's Claw, but it does come out a little bit faster, and you could use it a little bit quicker. Actually, you know, this just had me thinking. There's always people that are saying, you know, Lion's Claw is better than Giant Hunt's better than Lion's Claw. This is similar to Sword Dance and Double Slash in that way. Yeah, it's a little bit quicker. I think the damage on Lion's Claw is a little better, and Lion's Claw will give you more hyper armor, but they're very comparable. I mean, seriously, they're both very good. There's no wrong answer here. I think with Sword Dance and Double Slash, it's going to be whichever one you think is best for you. I would probably say the same for this. Whatever one's best for you. If you like Giant Hunt better, if you like Lion's Claw better. For the location, you can get Guts Greatsword in a carriage not far past Rotview Balcony, and then the first fort that is in Caelid is where you get Lion's Claw. There's a Lion Guardian inside. You do have to defeat him to grab the Ash of War Lion's Claw. In the best class for a pure strength build, in my opinion, you're going to go with Wretch, because you don't need the extra arcane, specifically at the hero class, so the Wretch will set you up good here to go for a strength build. Let's talk about notes. And now for the notes on this one. Lion's Claw and Giant Hunt are very similar, with one having more hyper armor and one being slightly faster. You could use both with the same exact build. Giant Hunt you can get from the Knight Rider and Liurnia of the Lakes, second one by the Grand Lift of Dectus. These are two of the most reliable Ashes of War in the game. And the number one build on here, I actually have two of them, is the Scavenger Curved Swords for Curved Swords with Seppuku, and then we have the Gargoyle's Twin Blades as well, also with Seppuku, an incredible Ash of War that is flat out broken and does a ridiculous amount of bleed. Yeah, by the way, I actually messed up a little bit here. I had a hard time with the sleeping pots on one of them, and I ended up missing a whole bunch, so I did mess up my jumps a bit here, but overall, the Scavenger Curved Swords are great at rune level 150, especially at 125, because you only really have to invest in Arcane on Occult, which is an awesome thing and allows you to have room for other stats. Yeah, these are awesome at 125 and 150. After you get to 200, there's better options. We have Scavenger Curved Swords, two of them, both on Occult with Seppuku. We're using the Dragon Communion Seal. We have the Raptor's Black Feathers, White Mask. We have the Claw Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats. And we're using Sleeping Pots on the Godskin Duo too. Now for the stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance, we have 16 Strength, 15 Dexterity, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier, we hit 70 Arcane. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grip Me Strength to buff this, and since we only really have to invest in Arcane for this one, we have a lot of room for other stats, which is pretty awesome, and a good amount of physical damage. We're going to show off now the Gargoyle Twin Blades. Now for the Twin Blades, you don't really have an option for Occult, so I like the Gargoyle Twin Blades here because you get the strength scaling, a little bit more AR, and then you get a lot of bleed build up overall too. I still prefer Curved Swords over Twin Blades, but overall with the Twin Blades, I think the Gargoyle Twin Blades are best. We have different stats here, so we're going to show them off. And now since the stats are split here, we have 45 Strength and 45 Arcane. We did hit 60 Vigor, we only have 16 Mind though, 26 Endurance. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grip Me Strength to buff this build. Now the Gargoyle Twin Blades you can get from the duo Gargoyle fight that's on the way to Deep Root Deaths through Nokron. The Scavenger Curved Swords right there on the map in Mount Gelmor, and then the Seppuku Ash of War is going to be over here by the Freezing Lake site of Grace. There's an invisible Teardrop Scarab you got to hit to get that Ash of War. And the best starting class for this one's going to be Bandit, because no matter what, you end up having to increase your Arcane stat. Whether you go with the Twin Blades, whether you go with your Curved Sword that you prefer, or whether you go with the Scavengers, no matter what, you're going to need Arcane, so you're going to go with Bandit. And for the notes, the Scavengers make it easy on Occult to hit 60 Vigor, 51 Poise, and get a lot of damage. Gargoyle's Twin Blades are great too with a lot of bleed build up. Keep in mind, almost any Seppuku jump attack bleed build will be easy mode. I recommend trying out Blood Blade if you get bored of the jumps. And the final notes on here, other choices to try. Square Off is really good. Phantom Slash is awesome. Repeating Thrust is pretty good overall, especially for bleed. Earthshaker with Guts Greatsword. Blood Tax with any long-reaching weapon. Chilling Mist and Cold Affinity. And I recommend trying a whole bunch of different things. Make your perfect build, have a lot of fun, and remember you can respec at any time. And thanks for watching this one. Thanks for tuning in to my top 10 overpowered smithing weapon builds in Elden Ring. If you're not subbed, definitely be sure to sub because you're not going to want to miss out on all the awesome Elden Ring content. We're going to be covering DLC like crazy when it releases. Does feel like this is the longest stretch these last couple months here, but keep in mind, DLC's right around the corner. FromSoftware does an amazing job. It's going to be phenomenal DLC. I cannot wait for it. I will catch everybody soon, and thanks for watching.